Test the walk that says, yeah, I lost some things, but I didn't lose me. It's the walk that carries the weight of what tried to break you, but moves like it already healed you. You see, every bounce back starts with a step, one shaky, faith-filled, tear-soaked step. And when you take that step, heaven starts rearranging the ground beneath you. Your fall was not your finish. It was the setup for your bounce back. Sometimes life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you so hard that you don't even realize how you got to the floor. One moment you were standing tall, full of faith, ready to conquer the world, and then suddenly it all came crashing down. The dream you believed in fell apart. The relationship you thought would last forever walked away. The confidence you once carried with such grace began to crumble under the weight of disappointment. And in that quiet space between what you expected and what actually happened, something inside you whispered, maybe this is it. Maybe this is where it ends. But I came to remind you, it's not the end. The fall is not your finish line. It's your setup for the bounce back. When you fall, it's easy to mistake the pain for punishment. It's easy to assume that your stumble disqualified you. But what if the fall was never meant to destroy you? What if it was designed to develop you? See, God doesn't waste a fall. He uses it as the very ground on which your next victory will stand. Every time you fall, there's something sacred about the ground you hit. It's the ground that humbles you, the ground that teaches you how to pray different, how to believe deeper, how to trust stronger. The fall teaches you what standing never could. Because when you've fallen, you learn that your value was never in your position. It was always in your perseverance. When you hit that low place, you discover who you really are. You find out what's real and what was just performance. You find out who loves you for you and who only loved you for your shine. The fall exposes things you never would have seen from the mountaintop. And even though it hurts, even though it confuses you, that exposure is holy. Because God can't bless what you pretend to be. He can only bless who you truly are. And sometimes the fall is His way of peeling back the layers so the real you can finally breathe. The real you. The one that's not trying to impress anyone. The one that's been crying in secret. The one that's been fighting battles no one sees. That's the one God wants to raise up. The bounce back doesn't start when people see you shining again. It starts in the quiet. It starts in the moment when you whisper, God, I don't know how, but I still believe. It starts when you choose to get up, even when your knees are shaking and your heart is still bleeding. That's the sacred moment of the bounce back. The decision to rise when rising doesn't make sense. Because it's not about how hard you fell. It's about how strong your faith remains in the aftermath. You might have lost your balance, but you didn't lose your purpose. You might have lost some people, but you didn't lose God's promise. When God is in the equation, the fall becomes fertilizer. The dirt that tried to bury you is the same dirt that's going to grow you. That's why you can't stay down too long. That's why you've got to push past the shame, past the regret, past the voice that keeps reminding you of what went wrong. Because if the enemy can keep you focused on the fall, he can keep you from walking into your bounce back. You have to remind yourself that failure doesn't define you, faith does. Every great story of restoration begins with someone who refused to let the fall be the finale. There's something about a person who's been through the fire and came out still walking. There's a different kind of strength in someone who's been broken but rebuilt. You can hear it in their voice. You can see it in their walk. It's that bounce back anointing. They move differently because they know what it costs to stand. They talk differently because they've learned the language of resilience. They worship differently because they've seen God lift them from places they thought they'd never escape. When you've fallen and gotten back up, you don't just walk. You walk with revelation. You understand that God's grace didn't just catch you. It carried you. Sometimes your fall is the stage where God chooses to reveal His glory. People may have counted you out. They may have whispered about your downfall, but they're about to watch your comeback. And when they see you rise, they won't be able to explain it. Because you didn't bounce back by willpower. You bounced back by divine power. It wasn't luck. It wasn't connections. It wasn't even your own strength. It was the same power that raised Jesus from the grave working inside of you. That's why no fall can finish you, because resurrection lives in your story. And maybe right now you're still lying there in that broken place, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. But I need you to know you're not done. You are in the middle of a setup. God is building strength in you that can only come from the ground up. Every tear, every scar, every moment of confusion, it's all part of the preparation. The fall made you flexible. The fall taught you how to depend on God instead of your own plan. The fall revealed that even when you're down, grace still finds you. And that's why you're going to bounce back stronger than before. So stop calling it a failure. Start calling it a setup. Start thanking God not just for the times you stood tall, but for the times He let you fall so He could teach you how to rise. Because when you rise this time, you're not rising with the same mindset. You're rising with wisdom, with humility, with a testimony that hell can't silence. You're rising with the kind of confidence that doesn't come from perfection, but from perseverance. You are not defined by the fall. You're defined by the bounce back. You're proof that God can take a collapse and turn it into a comeback. So lift your head, dry your tears, and get ready to walk again. Because this next walk, it's not the walk of the wounded. It's the stride of someone who's been resurrected by grace. And when you walk it out, heaven walks with you. Faith doesn't deny the fall, it declares the rise. Too often we think faith means pretending that everything is okay, smiling through the storm, and acting like we didn't just take a hit that nearly knocked the breath out of us. But real faith isn't denial. Real faith is standing in the wreckage, acknowledging what broke, and still believing that God can rebuild it. Faith is not blind to pain, it just refuses to let pain have the final word. You don't need to hide your tears to prove your trust in God. You can be hurting and hopeful at the same time, because faith doesn't require the absence of struggle. It just demands the presence of endurance. When the fall happens, when the job is gone, when the relationship ends, when the dream feels shattered, there's a temptation to think faith failed you. But faith was never meant to keep you from falling. It was meant to keep you from staying down. Faith is not a shield from life. It's the strength to face life and still walk through it. Sometimes we confuse faith with control. We think if we believe hard enough, nothing bad will happen. But faith isn't control, it's surrender. It's saying, even though I don't understand it, I still trust the one who's holding it. Faith doesn't make sense when you're standing in the ashes, but it starts to speak when you start to rise. There's something powerful about acknowledging your fall. When you say, yes, I fell. Yes, I failed. Yes, I'm broken. You open the door for God to do what only He can do. Because God can't heal what you hide. He can't restore what you pretend doesn't exist. So faith doesn't hide the fall. It invites God into it. It says, Lord, here's my mess. Here's my pain. Here's my fear. But I still believe you can turn this into something miraculous. That's where transformation begins. Not in denial, but in declaration. When you declare will rise, you're not ignoring the fall. You're announcing heaven's response to it. Faith is not about pretending you never fell. It's about remembering who's able to lift you. The enemy wants to keep you focused on the failure, but faith shifts your gaze toward the future. Faith doesn't ignore the facts. It just believes in greater truth. The fact may be that you lost your job, but the truth is God is still your provider. The fact may be that your heart is broken, but the truth is God is still your healer. The fact may be that you fell hard, but the truth is grace still works. Faith stands in the middle of contradiction and says, I see what it looks like, but I know what it's going to be. When you walk in faith after a fall, you start realizing that your wounds are not a sign of weakness. They're evidence that you're still alive, still moving, still fighting. The fact that you're still here, still breathing, still showing up means faith never left you. Maybe your faith got quiet for a while. Maybe it was buried under disappointment. But faith doesn't die in the fall. It waits for the rise. It's still there, whispering in your spirit, get up. Keep walking. There's more ahead. Faith doesn't erase the pain, but it gives purpose to it. It tells you that every bruise, every scar, every tear will one day God was faithful even in the fall. The rise that faith declares is not always immediate. Sometimes it's slow, step by step, day by day. You may not feel the victory right away, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. Faith often works underground like a seed buried beneath the dirt. The seed doesn't deny the darkness. It just grows through it. And that's what faith does for you. It roots you deeper in God while you're waiting for your breakthrough to bloom. You may not see the rise yet, but faith knows it's coming. That's why you keep walking, even when your legs feel heavy with doubt. Faith gives you vision when sight fails you. When everything around you looks hopeless, faith becomes your lens. It tells you, don't get stuck in what fell apart. Look forward to what's being built. The fall may have humbled you, but the rise will honor you. The same ground that witnessed your collapse will soon witness your comeback. And when people ask how you made it through, you'll be able to say, I stopped denying my fall and started declaring my rise. Because it wasn't my strength that brought me here, it was my faith. Sometimes faith's declaration isn't loud or fancy. It's quiet, raw, and honest. It's the moment when your heart whispers, God, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I believe you will. It's when you decide to show up again after rejection. It's when you choose to pray again after disappointment. It's when you try again after failure. That's faith. It's not about pretending the pain isn't real. It's about believing that pain won't have the last say. You might be walking through a season that looks like defeat, but faith says, this is not how the story ends. Faith reminds you that resurrection only comes after crucifixion. You may have fallen, but your fall is just the prelude to your rise. And when God lifts you up this time, you'll rise with revelation. You'll rise knowing that even in the fall, He was faithful. Even in the pain, he was present. Even in the silence, he was working. The rise that faith declares is not just about getting back to where you were. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. The fall stripped away everything false so that your rise could be authentic. You won't just stand again, you'll stand stronger. You won't just walk again, you'll walk wiser. Faith doesn't deny that you fell. It declares that falling wasn't the end. It declares that purpose is still alive. It declares that what the enemy meant for evil, God is already flipping for good. So don't be ashamed of your fall. Don't hide your scars. Let them speak. Let them tell the story of a person who refused to let defeat define them. Because faith isn't about pretending you didn't fall. It's about standing in your truth and saying, I fell, but I got back up. I stumbled, but I'm still walking. I broke, but I didn't quit. That's the rise that faith declares. And when you walk it out, heaven stands up and applauds the power of a believer who refused to stay down. Every comeback starts with a conscious step forward. The moment you decide to move again after being knocked down is the moment your comeback begins. It doesn't start when everything falls into place. It doesn't start when people notice you're doing better. It starts the very moment you whisper to yourself, I'm not staying here. That decision, that tiny trembling step of faith, is what shifts the atmosphere. Because movement, even when it's small, signals to heaven that you still believe. You may not have the strength to run. You may not even feel ready to walk. But when you make that conscious decision to move forward, something in the spirit begins to realign. The enemy's goal after a fall is to convince you to stay stuck. Stuck in regret, stuck in shame, stuck in what could have been. He'll whisper, what's the point of trying again? You already failed. You already fell. But every time you take a step forward, you silence that lie. Your movement becomes your ministry. Because the comeback doesn't require perfection, it requires participation. God can't move what refuses to move. So even if you're crawling, even if your steps are slow and unsteady, keep going. Each step you take says, I still trust you, God. That first step is often the hardest because it's the one that demands faith without evidence. You don't know how it's going to work out. You don't know if you'll get hurt again. But something in your spirit tells you that staying where you fell isn't an option. You've cried enough tears in that place. You've replayed the past long enough. And at some point, you have to make a conscious decision. I'm not going to live in this fall. I'm going to walk into my rise. That's the power of a comeback. It's birthed in decision, not perfection. God honors motion. Even if your steps are clumsy, he blesses the effort. Remember when Peter stepped out of the boat? He didn't walk on water because he was perfect. He walked because he decided. That single decision to step forward created an atmosphere for the miraculous. And that's what happens when you decide to move again. You might still feel broken, but your decision creates a bridge between what was and what's about to be. You stop waiting for strength to come and realize that strength shows up when you step. You don't have to have everything figured out before you move. You just have to be willing. God never asked you for flawless execution. He asked you for faith in motion. Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction becomes the biggest leap toward your destiny. Don't underestimate the power of one move, one prayer, one yes, one act of obedience, because every comeback begins the same way with one conscious step. It might be the step to forgive yourself. It might be the step to apply again, to love again, to believe again. Whatever your step looks like, take it with intention. The comeback walk is not glamorous. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. You'll have days when your heart still aches, when you question if you're really moving forward or just walking in circles. But that's okay. Progress isn't always visible. Sometimes the most powerful part of your comeback happens in private, in the quiet moments when no one's cheering you on. Those are the moments that define you. Because when you choose to move forward with no applause, no validation, and no clear outcome, that's when heaven leans in and says, that's my child. Don't let the weight of what was stop you from walking into what will be. The comeback requires courage. The courage to face the past without living in it. The courage to walk toward a future you can't yet see. You might not know where this road leads, but you can trust the one who's leading you. Every time you move forward, you're reminding your soul that God's promise didn't die in your fall. The vision didn't vanish just because life got messy. It's still there, waiting on your motion to activate it. You'll know you're in your comeback season when your steps start to carry a different kind of strength. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Awareness that God kept you when you should have been lost. Awareness that grace covered what could have crushed you. Awareness that you are still here on purpose. That awareness shifts how you walk. You start walking with authority. You start walking like you know your steps are ordered. You start walking like someone who's been through fire but came out refined. And here's the thing about the comeback walk. It doesn't erase your past, it redeems it. The steps you take forward become proof that the fall didn't win. The very thing that tried to stop you becomes the platform for your strength. Every time you walk, you're testifying without saying a word. You're showing the world that setbacks don't stop destiny. Because destiny doesn't die in disappointment, it just detours through development. God uses the detour to teach you what the direct path never could. When you decide to take that conscious step forward, you partner with heaven. You tell God, I may not understand the plan, but I trust the process. And in that trust, he begins to restore you piece by piece. He starts strengthening what was weak, healing what was broken, reviving what was dormant. The comeback isn't just about returning to where you were. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. You're not walking back, you're walking in through the pain, through the fear, through the doubt, into a place of peace and power. Sometimes your step forward will confuse people. They'll wonder how you're still smiling, how you're still moving when everything around you fell apart. But what they don't know is that your strength didn't come from the situation. It came from your Savior. They didn't see the nights you wrestled with giving up. They didn't see the prayers you whispered through tears. They only see the walk, but heaven saw the war it took to take that first step. That's why your comeback carries glory, because it cost you something. Every comeback starts with that conscious decision. I'm moving again. You may still feel the pain, but you walk anyway. You may still feel uncertain, but you move anyway. You may still be healing, but you move anyway. Because healing happens while you walk, not before you start. The strength you're looking for is waiting on the other side of your step. So lift your head, take a breath, and move forward, even if it's just one step today. Because the moment you do, heaven starts writing your comeback story. God restores not just what you lost, but who you became in the process. When you go through a fall, when you experience loss, heartbreak, or disappointment, there's a part of you that doesn't just lose things, you lose pieces of yourself. The laughter fades, the confidence dims, and the spark that once made you believe anything was possible starts to flicker. You start to wonder if you'll ever feel like you again. But the beautiful thing about God is that his restoration is never limited to what was taken from your hands. It extends to what was wounded in your heart. He doesn't just return what you lost. He rebuilds who you are. Sometimes we focus so much on the material or visible losses that we forget the internal transformation happening within us. You may have lost a job, a friend, a dream, or a relationship, but God saw something deeper that needed revival. Your faith, your identity, your voice. The loss wasn't random, it was refining. Because there's a version of you that only emerges through the breaking. You'll never know how much strength you carry until everything you leaned on collapses. You'll never realize how much grace you walk in until life forces you to walk without certainty. The restoration process is not about going back to who you were. It's about stepping into who you're meant to become. When God restores, he doesn't simply rewind your story. He writes redemption into it. He doesn't hand you back the same pieces you lost. He reshapes them into something greater. Think of Job, who lost everything, his family, his wealth, his health. But when God restored him, he gave him double for his trouble. Yet the greatest restoration wasn't in his possessions, it was in his revelation. Job came out knowing God in a deeper, more personal way. His restoration wasn't just external, it was eternal. And that's what God wants to do for you. He wants to use your loss to reveal your purpose, your pain to unlock your power, and your struggle to strengthen your spirit. Sometimes, before God can restore you, he allows life to strip you. Not because he's cruel, but because he's clearing space. You can't carry divine restoration with hands full of what no longer fits your destiny. The things that walked away weren't meant to stay because they couldn't sustain where God was taking you. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the disappointment, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God had to remove what was draining you so he could restore what defines you. The process hurts, but it's holy. Because when God restores, he restores with precision. Every piece he rebuilds comes back stronger, purer, and more aligned with your purpose. You might look in the mirror and see someone who's been through too much, who's lost too much, who's endured too many storms to ever feel whole again. But God looks at you and sees restoration in progress. He sees a vessel being remade. He sees potential hidden beneath the pain. You may not feel it yet, but the version of you that's emerging is wiser, tougher, more compassionate, and more aware of what truly matters. The fall didn't destroy you, it developed you. The pain didn't erase you, it evolved you. You are not who you were before the storm, and that's exactly the point. God's restoration always value. What you lost might have looked valuable, but what you're gaining is eternal. You're gaining resilience. You're gaining spiritual maturity. You're gaining discernment about who deserves access to you. You're gaining clarity about what's worth fighting for. The ovni may have needed validation. The restored you knows your worth without applause. The old you may have sought approval, the restored you seeks alignment. God's restoration process strips away the superficial so he can strengthen the spiritual. When God restores who you've become, he often reintroduces you to the world differently. People who knew you before the fall may not even recognize the new you. They remember the version of you that was insecure, dependent, or easily shaken. But this new version, this one has been through something. This one has walked through fire and didn't burn. This one knows that even when life breaks you, God can rebuild you in a way that makes you unbreakable. That's what divine restoration does. It gives you unshakable foundation. You no longer crumble under pressure because you've learned how to lean on grace instead of comfort. Sometimes restoration doesn't mean getting everything back. It means realizing you never needed everything you thought you did. It means understanding that peace is more valuable than possession, purpose is greater than platform, and healing is richer than having. God's restoration isn't about returning you to comfort. It's about returning you to calling. He restores your faith so you can see beyond the temporary. He restores your courage so you can step into the unknown. He restores your joy so you can live again, not just exist. You might not even notice the restoration while it's happening. It comes quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. One morning you'll wake up and realize you're no longer haunted by the same memories. You're no longer carrying the same weight. The things that used to break you don't move you anymore. That's what divine restoration feels like. It sneaks up on you and fills the spaces where pain used to live. It doesn't shout, it just shines. You start speaking differently, walking differently, loving differently. Because when God restores who you are, He doesn't just change your circumstances, He changes your capacity. You start seeing yourself the way He always did. Whole, chosen, and capable. The scars remain, but they no longer hurt. They become proof that you survived. Proof that what was meant to destroy you was used to develop you. Proof that God can take what's broken and make it beautiful again. And when people at you and ask, how did you recover from that? You'll be able to say, it wasn't me. It was the God who restores. You'll realize that the true miracle wasn't in getting your stuff back. It was in getting some of your stuff back. Your peace, your power, your purpose. That's the real restoration. Because you didn't just survive the storm, you were remade by it. And now, when you walk, you don't walk in weakness. You walk in wisdom. You walk in the fullness of who God created you to be. So don't mourn over what's gone too long. Don't measure God's goodness by what you can count. Because the greatest thing He's giving back to you isn't what you lost. It's who you're becoming. The restored you is unshakable, unstoppable, and undeniable. And when God finishes what He started, the version of you that rises won't even resemble the one that fell. That's the beauty of divine restoration. God doesn't just bring you back. He brings you back better. The bounce back walk requires you to move like you already made it. It's not about waiting until everything looks perfect, feels perfect, or aligns perfectly before you move. It's about walking with the confidence of someone who knows that the promise is already theirs. You have to walk like the victory is not a possibility but a reality. The bounce back walk is faith in motion. It's declaring through your steps that what God said will come to pass, even if your circumstances haven't caught up yet. It's walking like the healing is already done, the breakthrough is already here, the door is already open, even when all you see is the hallway. Because sometimes God tests your trust by asking you to walk before you see the way. There's a difference between walking in expectation and walking in evidence. Evidence waits to see it before believing it. Expectation believes it before seeing it. When you walk like you already made it, you move with a posture that tells heaven, I trust you enough to act like it's already finished. That kind of faith attracts favor. That kind of faith moves mountains. That kind of faith confuses the enemy because he can't understand how you're still moving when you're still waiting. But you know that your steps are not in vain because every step forward is a statement that says, I refuse to live defeated. The bounce back walk isn't arrogance, it's alignment. You're aligning your walk with God's word, not your worries. You're walking in rhythm with His promises, not your problems. Because when you walk like it's already done, your spirit begins to agree with what heaven has already spoken over your life. You stop begging God for what's yours and start thanking Him for what's becoming. You stop pleading for proof and start praising in advance. And that's when power shows up, because praise is the sound of faith that has already decided to win. When you move like you already made it, you stop letting your past define your pace. You don't walk with the limp of what hurt you. You walk with the strength of what healed you. You don't let shame dictate your stride. You don't let fear determine your direction. You walk with authority because you understand that your steps are ordered, not random. Every trial, every detour was part of the choreography of your comeback. So now, when you move with purpose. You move like someone who knows that even if the road is rough, it still leads to redemption. The bounce back walk demands that you shift your mindset. You can't move forward with a defeated mentality. You can't rise while rehearsing what went wrong. You have to start thinking, speaking, and acting like the victory has already been declared. Because faith isn't just something you feel, it's something you embody. You walk like it's done, even when it's still developing. You carry yourself with confidence, not because of what you see, but because of who you know is walking beside you. That's the power of divine assurance. You may not have the full picture, but you trust the painter. Sometimes God will ask you to walk while the wounds are still fresh. He'll tell you to move while the healing hasn't fully happened yet. Because if you wait till you feel ready, you'll never take the step. The bounce back walk is not about comfort. It's about conviction. It's about saying, I may still be bleeding, but I'm still believing. It's knowing that motion itself becomes medicine. The very act of walking builds the strength you've been praying for. And the more you move, the more your spirit begins to remember who you are. You stop identifying with the fall and start identifying with the rise. Walking like you already made it means you no longer apologize for surviving. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into the spaces where you once struggled. You stop explaining your process to people who weren't there for your pain. You walk boldly because you've earned every step. You walk gracefully because you understand the weight of where you've been. You walk intentionally because you know what it took to stand again. There's a certain power in the posture of someone who's been through something and still chooses to move forward with their head held high. When you move like it's already done, your walk becomes prophetic. You begin to walk in alignment with the future God already planned. Heaven starts responding to your faith. Doors begin to open not because you forced them, but because your stride signaled readiness. That's what happens when your movement matches your belief. God honors motion that mirrors faith. And before you know it, the very thing you were walking toward starts walking toward you. Blessings begin to halfway because faith is a magnet for favor. You might still have doubts whispering in your ear, trying to convince you that you're not ready, not worthy, not equipped. But you silence those lies with your steps. Every time you walk, you remind your doubt that you serve a God who finishes what he starts. You remind your fear that you've fallen before and still got back up. You remind your past that it has no authority over your future. The bounce back wasn't about pretending you're not afraid. It's about walking anyway. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move despite it. When you walk like you already made it, your energy changes. You start talking differently, thinking differently, and expecting differently. You begin to carry peace instead of panic. You walk into rooms knowing you belong there. You take steps toward dreams that once felt impossible. And the same people who saw you broken will now see you blessed. But you'll know that the blessing isn't the reward. It's the reflection. It's the evidence of what happens when faith keeps walking. The bounce back walk is not about waiting for approval or confirmation. It's about knowing that when God said it, that settled it. So you walk like your prayers have already been answered. You worship like the chains are already broken. You love like your heart is already healed. You give like abundance is already your portion. That's what walking in victory looks like. It's a decision to embody the outcome before it manifests. Because faith that waits to see is hope, but faith that walks before seeing is power. So wherever you are right now, whatever season you're in, take the next step. Even if it's small, even if it's shaky, move like you've already crossed the finish line. Because the bounce back walk isn't just about where you're going. It's about who you become while getting there. Every step strengthens your spirit. Every stride builds your story. And when you finally arrive at the promise, you'll realize you were walking in it all along. You didn't wait to win. You walked in victory from the start. Because the bounce back walk isn't about arrival. It's about awareness. The awareness that you're already whole, already chosen, already enough. And when you move like you already made it, the world eventually catches up to what heaven already declared. Life will always bring moments that test your strength, shake your confidence, and challenge your faith. There will be times when you fall so hard that you forget the rhythm of your own walk. But Walk It Out Wednesday, the bounce back walk, was never about progression. It was about progression. It was about remembering that even in the fall, God is faithful. Even in the breaking, he's building. Even when you can't see the way, he's still making one. This whole message, the fall, the faith, the forward step, the restoration, and the victory walk has been a reminder that your story doesn't end where you stumbled. The bounce back isn't just about getting back up. It's about rising differently. It's about understanding that the pain didn't disqualify you. It prepared you. Every scar, every setback, every silent tear became a seed for your comeback. And now, as you rise, you don't rise empty. You rise equipped. You rise wiser. You rise stronger. Maybe you've been walking with your head down, carrying the weight of what broke you. Maybe you've been replaying your mistakes, wondering if God can still use someone who's fallen so far. Let me tell you this, he can and he will. Because the same God who watched you fall is dead, who's empowering your rise. He never left you. He never forgot you. He never stopped calling you. Every step you take toward healing, toward purpose, toward faith, he's walking right beside you. The bounce back walk is not just a movement, it's a mindset. It's a declaration that you refuse to stay in defeat. You're choosing to walk like victory already lives in your veins. You're choosing to believe that God's promises still stand, even if your past tried to bury them. And as you walk, your steps become your sermon. Your endurance becomes your evidence. Your faith becomes your fragrance. You become a living, breathing testimony of what happens when grace meets grit. So tonight I challenge you, walk like it's already done. Walk like the weight has lifted. Walk like joy is returning. Walk like you know heaven is cheering you on. Because this next walk, it's not the walk of someone trying to prove their worth. It's the walk of someone who already knows they're chosen. It's the walk of someone who's been through the fire and came out refined. It's the bounce back walk, the faith walk, the I still believe walk. And when you walk it out this time, don't just walk for you. Walk for the version of you that almost gave up. Walk for the people watching you, needing proof that it's possible to rise again. Walk for the purpose that's been waiting on you to take that step. Walk like the ground beneath you has been prepared by grace itself. Because every step you take in faith is a step that reclaims territory from fear. You fell, yes, but you got back up. You broke, yes, but you found yourself again. And that's the victory, not that you never fell, but that you never quit. The bounce back walk is your reminder that no matter how far you've fallen, God's plan for you is still intact. His purpose still stands. His purpose still burns. So take a deep breath, straighten your crown, and walk like you already made it. Walk like restoration is your portion. Walk like you know you were built for this. Because you were built to rise. You were built to endure. You were built to bounce back. This is your moment. This is your stride. This is your comeback. Now go ahead, child of God, walk it out.